Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the evening regular meeting of April the 11th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Attend council chambers in person. If you wish to do this, please register in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in council chambers. You can watch the meeting live or recorded on the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com/District of Summerland. You may register in advance to speak during the meeting. If you wish to provide comment during the public comment opportunities found under items 8 and 15, please register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with your name, civic address, and your method of participation, whether in person, by telephone, or by Zoom. Further details will be provided to you when you register. And fourth, you can request to speak during the meeting. If you have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, the opportunity will be there, time permitting.
Sorry to interrupt. We have the public hearing.
Thank you.
I have it here.
Oh, I don't have the agenda. Oh, I hate reading that. Now I have to start all over again.
I will practice for this one.
Thank you. Oh, and I brought this up and I forgot. I don't have an agenda. Thank you, Graham. You can have this back right away because I just have to call it to order. Thank you. So I will call the public hearing to order on the administrative amendment. This public hearing is being held pursuant to Section 465 of the Local Government Act. All members of the public will be given a reasonable time to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that is the subject of this hearing. All information, correspondence, petitions, or reports that have been received by noon today concerning the subject bylaw have been circulated to council and are available to the public as part of the meeting package. The hearing process. Staff will provide their report, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to speak, which happens to be the district. Members of the public who have pre-registered to speak have been added to the speakers list in the order that requests were received. Those pre-registered will be provided the opportunity for public comment according to the order on the speakers list, followed by comment from those who have not pre-registered. Anyone who is not pre-registered can still attend council chambers and wait to speak following those on the speakers list, or alternatively can electronically participate by calling the conference line during the live hearing at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Speakers will be asked to state their name and civic address. Please note that all representations, whether written, verbal, or electronic, are available to the public for viewing as part of the public record. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker and should include all of the relevant information in their presentation. Further opportunity will be afforded to all members of the public to speak a second or third time with new information only once all persons have had an opportunity to speak. Council may ask questions of staff, the applicant, and the public, but once the public hearing is over, no new information can be received. Council debate on the bylaw will take place during the regular council meeting following the conclusion of the public hearing. At that time, any questions of staff will be for clarification purposes only. The corporate officer will now provide information on the notice of this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Boot. So notice of the public hearing was given by posting on the public notice board at Municipal Hall, on the district's website, and in the Summerland Review editions of March 31st and April 7th.
Thank you. So who's presenting on this? Joanne, if you'd like to go ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So the purpose of zoning amendment bylaw number 2022-009 is to make administrative amendments to the zoning bylaw. So it is intended to make the zoning bylaw better and include strategic policy changes. And we're doing this to keep the zoning bylaw current and relevant. So the proposed changes, there are quite a few touch points in the proposed bylaw. So it will impact agricultural zones, residential zones, and the general regulations will be applied to all properties. So it will affect potentially every zoned property within the district. As you can see in this table, I've categorized the proposed amendments into general themes of consistency and clarification, improvements, corrections, and strategic policy. So I'm not going to be describing all of the amendments in detail because some of them are quite minor in nature, but I will provide some more description to ones that have more significant changes. So first, the general regulations. So under the theme of consistency, we're essentially trying to align our zoning bylaw with other district bylaws or best practices. So this includes the proposed prohibition of derelict motor vehicles in all zones. And this would be a change from the current zoning that only prohibits in residential zones. And this prohibition would be consistent with the good neighbor bylaw. And I'll just point out that there is a farm vehicle exemption as part of the bylaw. And there's also changes proposed for retaining wall regulations to align with the building bylaw and to provide further clarifications. So for retaining walls, this slide is showing the existing and the proposed diagrams for height calculations. So currently, a 1-to-1 ratio is allowed to be considered a separate wall for calculating height. The proposed bylaw requires a 2-to-1 ratio to be considered a separate wall. So a 1-to-1 ratio would still be allowed under the bylaw, but the series of walls would need to be no more than 2 meters from the base of the lowest wall. And this aligns with good engineering practice. So under the theme of clarification, we are changing some of the definitions in our bylaw to make it more clear as to how we interpret the zoning. So the proposed changes to the definitions will include having an eating and drinking establishment as part of a winery and cidery, and that recreational vehicles are not dwellings. Under the theme of improvements, we're making some changes to allow for more desirable scenarios to occur. So this includes allowing for lot line adjustments that better a non-conforming situation and enabling a simple change of use in the downtown without triggering parking requirements. There are many corrections proposed as part of this. Most of them are very minor in nature, so I won't be going into detail on those, but they are contained within the bylaw. In terms of residential regulations, these next regulations are applicable to all of our residential zones that are listed here. So this includes all of our urban residential zones from low to high density. So under the theme of corrections, we are including an adjustment to the setback regulations for lake fronting lots. So this amendment provides all residential zones the same relaxation to the rear yard. So 6 meters instead of the 7.5 for lake fronting lots. And just as a reminder, the rear for lake fronting lot is opposite of the lake, which is most oftentimes facing the street. And it will also require a 6-meter setback for principal and accessory buildings. Under the theme of improvements, we are allowing for private lawn areas to be counted towards amenity space, so that townhomes that have fenced private backyards can use those areas to count towards their amenity space calculations. And we are also removing the unused RPN residential pocket neighborhood zone. Under the agricultural regulations, these are applicable to the A1 and A2 zones. And we are correcting under the bylaw to add back the story requirement for accessory buildings and clarifying that only one principal dwelling is allowed. Under the theme of strategic policy, these are more significant changes that were the outcome of council discussion or formal resolutions. So for additional dwellings for farm help, we are removing the restrictive covenant requirement from the bylaw. So the other use restrictions will still apply for now. So this is considered a minor strategic change. And we're also addressing the request for allowing kitchens in temporary farm worker accommodation. So for temporary farm worker accommodation, we're trying to align the district's requirements with what is required to participate in the federal foreign workers programs. So we've made allowances to have kitchens and common areas in this type of housing. And we also went to from an arable land requirement to one that's based on a farm unit. We removed the maximum bedroom size, which can be problematic for pre-manufactured buildings. And we are not requiring a restrictive covenant, which is often a duplication of the ALC's process for these types of buildings. We also are introducing a little bit of flexibility, deciding outside of the farm home plate, depending on an agrologist report. So just in summary, the proposed zoning amendment bylaw is a district-wide amendment that includes many touch points within the zoning regulations. So these changes will impact all properties by making amendments to our general regulations. And there are additional changes that will be that will affect agricultural zones as well as lake fronting lots and residential zones. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of Joanne? Okay, could I have someone? Never mind. I will ask for the second time. Any questions of Joanne? Third and final time. Any questions for Joanne? Okay, I'll declare this public hearing closed. Sorry. Right, I called 3 times. Is there anyone in the gallery that wishes to speak?
I don't have a question.
You asked for questions for Joanne. You didn't ask
Do you have a question?
Not necessarily a question, but
Please come up to the mic and state your name and your civic address. There's, perfect, thank you.
All right. My name is Matt Barg. My civic address is 11104 Jones Flat Road. I just saw briefly late Friday night something about changes, and it said something about derelict vehicles, and I'm curious what that is necessarily or exactly. But even before that, there's been a lot of government overreach, both federal and provincial, recently, and this kind of looks municipal. I'm not sure what comes down the line after this. And I just think if people have private property and they're not doing anything wrong, they should be left alone. So,
Okay, thank you. If you have a question, you can ask it.
what's the definition of a derelict vehicle?
Okay, I'll defer to our staff for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So under our bylaw, derelict motor vehicle means an inoperative, physically wrecked or disabled, unlicensed motor vehicle. And it does not include, in accordance with the Farm Practices Protection Right to Farm Act, derelict farm vehicles, equipment, implements, or parts thereof used for normal farm practice. And that definition is similar to our good neighbor law.
And is it inclusive of all of those things or one of those things? For example, if you have a vehicle on your property and it's not insured, is that definition of a derelict vehicle?
Yeah, so it would be an or. So it could include any combination of those things. It doesn't include the derelict motor vehicle prohibition is for outdoor storage of those vehicles. So it wouldn't include somebody keeping those in their garage or an outbuilding.
But it's their own land, right? So I just think that's, I mean, it's one thing if someone has a bunch of vehicles on their property and they're clearly smashed and they're ready for the wrecker. But if people have like a truck that they use every once in a while, and it's rusty, but they use it for hauling hay or whatever, even if it's not necessarily a farm vehicle. Like, for example, we have a truck that we rarely use, but we use it to help out people on farms, but it's not a farm vehicle. It's not insured. We insure it when we want to use it. Why would we insure a gas guzzler that we use twice a year? You just put it on for a day. So these sorts of things is a bit disturbing, and there's all kinds of vehicles around town that definitely would fit into that category. Also, people like me, we're not rolling in money, so we often have parts that we use for other vehicles. So where does this lead us? And what comes next? And this is disturbing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. That's your 5 minutes.
Yeah, I saw her. Thank you.
Marianne, would you care to comment? No, okay. I'll ask again for the second time and the third time. Okay, the public hearing is closed. Now I will call the regular evening council meeting to order of Monday, April the 11th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. You can attend council chambers in person. If you wish to do so, please register in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in council chambers. You can watch the meeting live or recorded. You can do so on the District of Summerland YouTube channel at youtube.com/District of Summerland. You can register in advance to speak during the meeting. If you wish to comment on the public comment opportunities found under items 8 and 15, you are asked to register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with the following information: your name, civic address, method of participation in person, by telephone, or through Zoom. Further details will be provided when you register. You can also request to speak during the meeting. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may be given the opportunity provided time is permitted. Provided time allows. After I have provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Any late items to introduce? Okay, thank you. Could I call for approval of the agenda as presented? Councillor Van Alphen. Councillor Holmes, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And adoption of the minutes from the March 28th regular evening council meeting. Councillor Van Alphen and Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. And moving right on to the zoning bylaw review of the public hearing this evening, 2022 administrative update. So we're considering third reading now. A question for Joanne. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had noticed that derelict motor vehicle item as well, and wondered exactly what it meant. I've got the definition up here. Derelict motor vehicle means any inoperative motor vehicle which is not licensed. Is that the current definition? I think you've read something slightly different. That's what I... oh, yeah, there is a new definition, I see, yes. Inoperative, physically wrecked or disabled or unlicensed motor vehicle. So any one of those, I mean, lots of people might have, as the speaker said, a vehicle that's not licensed. I mean, ourselves, sometimes we put the license on it, sometimes we don't. So it's, and I know there's been a concern, I think our people from the Bottleneck Drive have had gone around and identified derelict vehicles that should be dealt with.
Could I just interrupt you for a moment? This is the time to have questions of staff for clarification, and which you have absolutely done. We'll have the opportunity to further discuss and debate this bylaw when it comes time to it later in the meeting when it's on the floor.
So I'll go straight to my
If you have another question, that'd be fine.
point or question. I just wondered if there was, so maybe this is related, but is there a medium ground here? All right, we'll save it for the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Barkwell, I think that, so what we're doing here, what we're proposing tonight with the amendment bylaw is there's already a definition for a derelict motor vehicle. It's that first definition that Councillor Barkwell read out loud. It means an inoperative motor vehicle which is not licensed. So that's fairly loose. Again, we agree at the staff level that just not licensing or licensing your vehicle is not sufficient for the use of that definition. So that is one of the proposed changes of the amendment bylaw, is to create more clarity around that definition. You know, we are specifically exempting farm vehicles in recognition that we don't want to be impacting farm operations with this definition. And Joanne just mentioned to me as well, it's consistent with our good neighbor bylaw definition for the same definition for the same use, which we would use for untidy, unsightly premises. So we're trying to make our bylaws more consistent. Again, this is an administrative update. None of the uses are changing. It is meant to create greater clarity for enforcement staff in the field.
But if I followed it correctly, this didn't apply to agricultural lands previously, so that's a big difference. On a 10-acre farm, you could have 2 or 3, I don't know, Councillor Van Alpen probably has 15 hidden somewhere on his property. And, he'll get at them now and then. So this is a big change. It's not just a definition change. And unlicensed, technically, and I'm sure you're not going to go after every unlicensed vehicle, but technically it falls into that category. So I'm not sure if this works here for farmlands. I think we might have to rethink that.
Yes, and we have the opportunity to rethink it when it's on the floor. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I'll just continue, I guess, because that's where we're at. But it says it does not include, in accordance with the Right to Farm Act, derelict farm vehicles. So what's the difference between a derelict farm vehicle sitting on a property right at the road versus the neighbor who may not be on agricultural land and has a derelict non-farm vehicle? I understand the concept is to try not to have all these derelict vehicles around an unsightly premise. I guess that's where the question is going to be raised, right? If we're going to treat them equally or not. Is there a difference between a derelict farm vehicle and a derelict regular vehicle? That's really the question.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Carlson, I don't think there really is in practicality. I think there is some rights to farmers to the Right to Farm Act. So that's why that's written that way, is that we're recognizing through the bylaw that there is protections for farmers to be able to run their operations with a derelict farm vehicle. Now, I do want to say too, if I've got the floor, that all of this policy and provisions within this bylaw are basically tools for our enforcement staff. It's not like we're going to, as soon as this goes forward, it's going to be going to every single property and ensuring that there's no derelict vehicles within the town of Summerland. It's an opportunity for our wildland enforcement staff to have the ability to do something if there is an issue. But generally, most of our property owners are doing a good job of keeping their property owners, in a good state and in condition. And this is only an opportunity for our enforcement staff to have some discretion and the tools to be able to do that in the field.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, it brings up a good topic and interesting questions. Like, I have friends that are hobbyists that are, maybe restoring a vintage vehicle in their yard, or in their garage in a residential area, but it's a hobby. They're just tinkering with it, and it may not be insured, yet. And so, yeah, there's some questions, and I appreciate your previous comment about we're not going out head hunting. But if you got an auto wrecker in your yard or a huge amount of cars, then there may be a problem. But yeah, and I don't have 15 unlicensed vehicles, Madam Mayor, I promise you that. Thank you.
Question, Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering, Penticton or West Kelowna and stuff, do they have the same wording, or do they say more than one or more than two or anything? Do we know how other communities have dealt with it?
Through the chair, I don't specifically know the number. I do know that there are other places that I believe the RDUS allows for 2 derelict vehicles before they are maxed out essentially per property. So I would say that it's likely that other communities might allow for 1 or 2, depending on the property size and other factors. But that isn't something that I have at my fingertips to be able to specifically address the question.
Councillor Holmes.
There are some areas of the regional district, rural areas, where there's derelict vehicles all over the place, and it's absolutely unenforceable. There is not much that can be done about it, and they just sit there, and it's a complete eyesore. And this is having this in the bylaw doesn't necessarily isn't going to change anything. But as our director of development service says, it's a tool if for the bylaw officer if something becomes really a huge problem.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question through our Director of Planning, if I may. In most situations, it would be a complaint driven to our bylaw officer. So if the neighbors aren't upset with your uninsured, I don't like using the word derelict, but uninsured vehicles, if they put a complaint in, I guess bylaw will have to follow through. But if no one's complaining, it's not an issue. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, yes, Councillor Van Elfen's correct. Especially for untidy and unsightly, we strictly go to complaint-based enforcement.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
On that issue of a complaint-based, if you had one unlicensed vehicle on your property and it wasn't really a ugly vehicle or anything, but you didn't get along with your neighbor and he put in a written complaint just to be an uncooperative neighbor, is the district obliged to act on that, or is discretion allowed?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Barco, that's a great question. For any of our bylaws, unless it's like a health and safety matter, like a building code compliance matter, for example, we have the ability and discretion to enforce our own bylaws. And definitely in those type of situations do occur where there is a problem between neighbors and they're trying to use a minor point of a bylaw to evoke some form of revenge on their neighbor. But generally our officer becomes in tune with that fairly quickly, can make the determination that, hey, there's not really that much here for me to respond to, and generally uses that discretion wisely in enforcing our bylaws.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Carlson.
I have a question about 7.13 on the temporary farm worker accommodation. I'm wondering, when we have a maximum gross floor area of 186 meters squared, what is that based on? Why is that the maximum?
Through the chair, that is a number that was within the zoning bylaw before, and something that I didn't look to change, keeping that gross floor area the same. So that would be where that number was decided upon would have been through previous versions of the zoning bylaw. And I would just say in general, when selecting those, part of that is a little bit of science and a little bit of art based on selecting those types of regulations. So it was probably something where it was considered to cover most situations without requiring a variance, but still have a maximum to not have something that was completely out of scope of what we were contemplating under the provisions for farm worker accommodation to occur.
Thank you. And just to follow that then, so if it's cited on a farm home plate, does that accommodation, which most often is actually temporary in nature, not temporary in worker, does that count towards your lot coverage of your farm home plate? If you get 40% or 30, whatever percent?
So the farm home plate does increase when you have an additional dwelling for farm help, or if you have temporary farm worker accommodation. So it increases to 1,500 square meters. And then the lot coverage within the farm home plate is applied to that larger farm home plate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Would someone like to bring forward a motion, please? Councillor Barkwell. Could you please turn your mic on? Thank
Sorry.
you.
That, I'll move that zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw number 2022-009, 2022 administrative update be read a third time.
Okay. Seconder? Councillor Holmes? Okay, further discussion, Councillor Barkwell.
So concerning the derelict vehicle portion of the bylaw that we just discussed, I initially had some concerns, but I think that after listening to the answers to the questions we all had, I'm okay with it now. I wouldn't vote against all these changes for that. I don't expect a problem with the discretion that our bylaw enforcement officers have.
Thank you. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a problem with it because I have one of those unlicensed vehicles in my yard. Because my son comes from Toronto twice a year, I insure that vehicle while he's here. And when he goes back to Toronto, the vehicle is parked. So what this bylaw does, it makes me break the law twice a year because the insurance expires and the vehicle does not move. So theoretically, yes, as our director said, that I may not be, there may not be any enforcement, but there may be. I feel that if you want to have a motor vehicle that's derelict, you maintain it in the inoperative, physically wrecked, or disabled, but not unlicensed. Because you're putting a lot of people in Summerland breaking the law with a stroke of that pen. So I will support the changes. I will not support the derelict definition as it stands. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Holmes.
A question through maybe to our corporate officer, but if we wanted to amend this to remove the word unlicensed, what would be the process for doing that?
So through the mayor to Councillor Holmes. So the bylaw, it could be amended prior to giving it third reading, but the proper time would have been to amend it during the second reading. So I would be a bit hesitant. We may have to pull back and redo the public hearing.
Could I ask a question? If this, because it's on the floor now for third reading, if it was defeated tonight, does that not put us back to second reading automatically? And then we'd have to go through the public hearing again once that amendment was made? Or does, yes, so it actually goes back to first reading, right? And then you talk about it again as for second reading before it went to the public hearing?
No, Madam Mayor, so the bylaw has received second reading. So if it was defeated at night, the bylaw would technically be sitting at second reading.
And at second reading, it could then be amended? Okay, thank you. Brad?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. But as well, we'd have to reschedule and re-advertise a new public hearing, just so that you're aware of that before we could go to third. Thank you.
Did you have your hand? Councillor Holmes.
All this makes me wonder why we have public hearing. I mean, you want to, you put something out there, you hear from the public, and you can't make a little tweak where you're just eliminating one word from the bylaw without having to start the whole thing again. I really question why do we have a public hearing if that's the case, if you have to blow the whole thing up to make one little change. I find it a little frustrating. And you think, okay, removing one word should be a pretty easy process, and that's certainly why why we want to hear from the public. So I don't know. It's kind of ties our hands.
The quick answer is it's legislation. Under the community charter, the process is there, but that's not saying that it's necessarily conducive to this kind of situation that we're finding ourselves in tonight with just that single word amendment. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I just wonder if we might table it and then get some further direction or input to see if we can somehow make a change without starting again.
Let's hear from you, Kendra.
Sorry, my computer just closed. So if the bylaw, after it's had public, or after it's gone through the public hearing, if the alteration does not alter the use, increase the density, or without the owner's in consent increase the density, the bylaw can be amended. So as I asked Brad, I don't think this amendment would trigger any of those things.
Perfect. Okay. So then does someone bring forward the amendment, or do we need to vote this down and then bring forward an amended motion?
There could be a motion to amend the main motion if council so chooses, or if someone would like to put one forward.
Okay, who would like to put that forward? Do you want to do it? Councillor Patton.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I may change the definition of derelict motor vehicle, means an inoperative, physically wrecked, or disabled motor vehicle. This does not include, in accordance with the Farm Practices Protection Right to Farm Act, derelict farm vehicles, equipment, implements, or parts thereof used in normal farm practice.
Seconded by Councillor Barkwell. Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Just a comment, when you brought that up, it made me think of on Garnet Avenue, there's actually farm implements and old tractors that are there as a work of art, and it's quite entertaining for people who are walking by. So in some cases, we have to embrace this.
Mm-hmm.
But they're farm vehicles, so we're okay.
Absolutely, but we still have to embrace it.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Depends how you look at it. Councillor Van Alphen.
I just want to say thank you to Councillor Patton for bringing it forward after further, thinking this through a little bit further. It's not just a derelict vehicle. It could be a boat on a trailer and the trailer's unlicensed because it's wintertime and you're not using it, or it's your RV, that's late fall, you've used in the summer, and now the insurance has run out, but it's parked in your yard. So, I mean, there's multiple things that it could be. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I appreciate the gentleman in our gallery who spoke earlier. That information is great to hear from the public, and I think it's a good compromise. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion on this amended motion? we're talking about voting on the amendment, but I want to know if there's any more discussion on this amendment. That's on the floor now. Okay, so we are now voting on the amendment. All in favor? Great. And now we will vote on the original motion as amended. All in favor? Good. As amended, yes. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay, next up is the mayor's report. Very short one tonight, beginning with thanking Councillor Carlson for ably chairing the meeting on March the 28th, as I attended a Climate Solutions Council meeting in Vancouver. On March the 31st, I attended the South Okanagan Similkameen Local Immigration Partnership Council meeting at the SOIC's offices in Penticton. Since I was invited to join the council early in 2021, this is the first time I've been able to attend an in-person meeting, so that was really nice. SOSLIP, as it is called, is a community-based partnership that brings together representatives from government, business, community services, financial institutions, education, libraries, health, and others to develop and implement a settlement and integration strategy for newcomers to the region. Local immigration partnership, LIPs, are established throughout Canada. The program is funded by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. LIPs also help newcomers by fostering access to the labor market, assisting with social inclusion, and building welcome communities with the goal of achieving increased economic, social, political, and civic participation by newcomers. For 3 days last week, I attended the Local Government Leadership Academy Annual Forum. And Council, earlier today, you would have received an email from me that was a 2-pager kind of summary of the presentations that were there. If you have any questions about that, please reach out, because as I said, it was just a few short notes on each of the sessions I attended. And finally, on behalf of Council, whether you're staying at home or traveling to be with family, we all wish you an enjoyable and safe Easter weekend. And that's it. CAO, your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's great to be back at work after a week of vacation. Thank you to David Svedlichny for taking care of things while I was away. I am pleased to report the pressure reducing valve replacement on Harris and Giants Head Road went very well, and the disruption of water service was minimized to the 176 affected properties. A significant savings was achieved because staff of the district did the excavation, site preparation, and they also fabricated and tested the new valve in our own public works facility. And then they installed and backfilled the replacement themselves. This is indicative of the exceptional skill of our staff to be able to undertake this kind of operation in-house. The effort to pile woody debris for burning in the Eisentalk Dam has begun. Professional assessment of the contractor is that debris will need more time to dry further before the burning can take place. And so the work this spring will be to pile the debris along the reservoir edge where it'll dry out over the hot summer months. Timing of the burning will now be in the fall when crews will return to complete the work. With the work of the outlet pipe being completed as well as the armoring of the dam face, we hope to have an on-site tour of the works later this summer for any interested council members. Finally, I wanted to mention that applications have been received and reviewed for the Special Committee for the Review of Council Compensation. Selected applicants will be notified this week, and we will look to have 2 or 3 meetings to review available information and to do comparative analysis before returning to council with any recommendations by June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the CAO report? All right. Do we have anybody wanting to speak to the first of 2 public comment opportunities? I'll start with the people in the gallery. No? All right. Is there anyone online, Kendra? Oh, yeah, Duncan Taylor is here. Yeah, so both of those people are already registered. Okay. So we'll move on to the first of the development reports, 9.1, Development Variance Permit for 12504 Jones Flat Road, DVP 22-001. Alex, thank you.
Good evening, Council. So the district has received an application for variance at 12504 Jones Flat Road. The proposal seeks to vary the maximum available coverage within the farm home plate. So the subject property is an agricultural lot just northwest of downtown Summerland. The applicant is proposing to demolish an existing residence on the property in order to establish a new residence and a new farm home plate location. In the OCP, the future land use designation of the subject property is agricultural, and it is zoned A1 agricultural small acreage. These land uses are generally consistent with the neighboring parcels. Should be noted that the subject property is located within the agricultural land reserve. No approval is required. However, a referral was submitted to the Agricultural Land Commission and a response was received. A letter of correspondence was received for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. Ministry staff noted that they have concerns with the proposed location of the farm home plate cited or of the new farm home plate sited further back from both the top of the bank and Jones Flat Road as its impact on productive farmland. Correspondence was also received from the Agricultural Land Commission. ALC staff stated that the ALR Act and regulations permit a principal residence of up to 500 square meters. There is also an allowance for 1,000 square meters for fill for principal residences. The drawings show the house and the yard extends over 1,000 square meters, but at this time it is unclear how much fill will be needed. If that amount is over 1,000 square meters, then an application to the ALC will be required. The farm home plate is a zoning bylaw regulation meant to limit the residential usage of agricultural properties. Specifically, a farm home plate is defined by the zoning bylaw as a 905 square meter portion of an agricultural lot where a residence and other structures related to the residential usage are permitted. Zoning bylaw section 8.1.5C limits the amount of residential building coverage to 35% within the farm home plate, which equals a total of 3,409 square feet or 316.75 square meters. The remainder of an agricultural lot outside of that farm home plate is meant to be used for agricultural purposes. The owners have applied to increase the amount of allowable residential building coverage from 35 to 46% to allow for the proposed new home to be constructed. This would allow for a residential footprint of 417 square meters. Although this is a significant increase from the allowable coverage, the proposed residence is still under the allowable principal residence side permitted by the ALC, which as mentioned is 500 square meters. The main rationale for the requested increase is due to the homeowners wishing to age in place. Plans for the new home are centered around a one-story living that requires a larger building footprint. The subject property is currently home to a small orchard and assortment of agricultural structures and an older farm residence. The existing farm home plate at 12504 Jones Flat Road is slated to be demolished to make room for an expansion of orchard operations that will increase the current farmed site coverage from 20% to 43%. The general intent of the farm home plate on agricultural properties is to confine development related to residential uses in one area to maximize the potential for farming activities on the remainder of the parcel. Though the requested variance is a significant increase in coverage, the proposal is meeting the general intent of the zoning provision and is planned to enhance the agricultural operation on the property through the additional planted acreage. The proposed farm residence is well contained, and the main reason for the expanding over the allowable coverage is the owner's desire to construct a one-story residence to assist with aging in place. As such, staff recommend approval of the proposed variance with the condition that the existing farm home plate is remediated to a state where it can support future agricultural use. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Questions, Council? Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you for that. One of the things that I find interesting is in Summerland, we have a farm home plate and we have a limitation on how much coverage you can have on that plate. But the ALC has a regulation of 500 square meters. So in Summerland, if this is a 11-acre orchard and they have a farm home plate, and we have rules in place that say how many square feet or how much percentage of that farm home plate you can cover with residential, our number in Summerland is a lot less than 500 square meters. And so if we have that, I guess what I'm reckoning with there is that we have a farm home plate or we have a 500 square meter rule. And in Summerland, we have a farm home plate. And so they're asking for a variance so that they can have a 400 and something square meter house, but it still covers almost half of their home plate. So I guess the question is, why do we need the farm home plate if we're not gonna, or the other way around? You know, why are we gonna keep why do we give out a variance if we have a regulation of what the lot coverage can be? We have a maximum amount. It's not 500, it's probably 325 or something like this. So I guess I'm a little bit perplexed as how we solve this one.
Brad?
Your worship, to Councillor Carlson, I think you brought some really excellent points, and I think a lot of that actually will be brought up tomorrow morning at our Housing on Agricultural Land workshop, which will be posing these questions to stakeholders in the room with regards to some of these policy decisions that we want to move forward with in the future. I think the difference between a farm home plate and the 500 meters squared provision is the 500 meters squared references a single building, a maximum amount to basically avoid like a mansion, like 500 square meters is quite a big size, a single family residential building. But the farm home plate has restrictions with regards to other residential buildings as well. Accessory buildings would be included in that. So yes, I would say our farm home plate restrictions are more restrictive, but I think that's intended to be what we wanted to see in terms of policy guidance for the District of Summerland, including our official community plan referencing the need for restricting properties to the farm home plate. So some of this will get brought up, like I said, in future planning work, but at this point in time, we're just looking for council's guidance on this variance application in light of our current regulatory framework. Thank you.
So just to follow then, if it was a 2-story building, it would take a lot less footprint, but it would still be within the 500 square meters, which is what we would more commonly see.
I I think the 500 meters squared is it floor area or, okay, thank you. Yes, you're correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will start off apologizing, or I'm not gonna, no, I won't apologize. I was on a really well-deserved holiday last week. While I was gone, was this presented to our agricultural committee? Have they had an opportunity to weigh into this conversation?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Van Alphen. So for development variance permits, those types of permits aren't brought forward to committee. That includes our agricultural advisory committee as well as our advisory planning commission, unless there's a form and character element to it. So for that reason, it wasn't brought forward to our agriculture advisory committee.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? I'm just going to go to Councillor Holmes first. I'll come back to you, and then I have one as well.
So the correspondence from the Ministry of Agriculture and the ALC, we don't have that in our package, just those two paragraphs you have in your report. That's the information we have on that.
All the verbiage is in the all the verbiage is in the staff report.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question. So if the applicant intends to age in place, and this is their retirement home, who is going to farm the land? Where is it? Does it matter to, I mean, is there going to be an application to build more worker housing? Is it like, I just wonder, how far do we have to take that next step in this? Because right now there's obviously a partial orchard there that will be rebuilt, but not necessarily by the people who are currently the owners. So I guess it may not be a question. It brings up the dilemma we have in Summerland, where we have people who are moving into these beautiful pieces of land. They're not farming the land, and hopefully they're leasing it to someone, but they still require, that someone still requires some facilities of some kind. And I guess the concern is none of that is presented on here. They're simply suggesting that they will remove derelict old buildings and replace it with a campus.
My question follows up on what Councillor Carlson was just saying. It shows in, sorry, it shows in the zoning analysis table that the accessory buildings coverage is being cut in half, and the lot coverage for farm buildings is down from 10% to 1%.
Sorry, I can actually address that. That's not correct. So if you just note, it says bylaws standards. So that's what the bylaw standard is, and that's what the proposed site will have. So it's not changing from 10 to 1. It's the bylaw standard is 10% coverage is allowed for coverage for farm buildings, and then 1% is what they have. They're actually will be maintaining the barn structure on the property, and I would assume probably constructing some more agricultural structures.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. I misunderstood what I was reading. Any other questions on this? Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The development variance permit application. Second paragraph, the proposed orchard block will increase planting site coverage from the current 20 to 43%, and extensive new orchard which surrounds and conceals a new rancher home on all sides. The site also includes a large environmental sensitive zone which cannot be utilized for agricultural planting. On ag land, is that the case? In environmentally sensitive, I could farm environmentally sensitive areas, but I can't build on it. So this person could actually have more orchard than what they think they may be able to have, because environmentally sensitive on ag land doesn't count unless I'm building on it. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct, Councillor Van Alphen, that's correct. Yeah, so farm uses are exempt from our environmentally sensitive development permit. But there might be still some areas that they don't want to touch, right?
Oh,
And that's
fair
their
enough.
decision, right? So.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes, could I have you turn your mic off,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. So I also noticed that it's a house and it's a suite. So I just there's two different things. I'm just wondering if it gets registered as such so that when we have regulations that allow a secondary dwelling, we already recognize that there is one built here. Is that something that we're paying attention to?
Yeah, so if the subject variance is approved, there'll for sure be a building permit applied for. And yeah, absolutely, we'll be checking to make sure it's a legal suite, it meets our zoning through all of our checks in that process, absolutely. And it'll be registered.
Okay, Brad?
Yeah, just to clarify further to Alex's comment, like this would be considered a secondary suite, not a carriage house, for the purpose of our bylaw, because it's got an interconnected roof structure. So that's the reason why wouldn't be considered a carriage home, I believe.
So following tomorrow's conversation and the implementation and potentially of secondary dwellings on farmland, they'd be allowed to build another suite or another building on this farm home plate, assuming they got another variance?
Yeah, of course, they would require another variance to the farm home plate to allow for that.
Just to add to Brad's point, currently our zoning bylaw only allows for either a secondary suite or a carriage house in zones. So there would have to be restructuring within the zoning bylaw to allow for that scenario to occur.
Regardless of whether it's on agricultural land or res. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And also regardless of whether it's attached to with a breezeway or another, because I know that that's something that's changed over time as well.
Yeah, we only permit one secondary suite total. So that's right. If it was attached to a structure, it'd be considered a third dwelling unit, I guess.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Van Alphen.
May I bring the resolution forward, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. That council authorize issuance of development variance permit DVP 22-001 for property located at 12504 Jones Flat Road, legally described as Lot 12A, District Lot 472, Osoyoos Division, Yale, District Plan 148, and that the variance to the following sections of zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted. Lot coverage within the farm home plate sections 8.1.5C to vary the maximum lot coverage within the farm home plate from 35% to 46% proposed.
Oh, now it's me. I forgot to turn my mic off. Seconded by Councillor Barkwell. Okay, further discussion, Councillor Carlson.
Now that we've discussed that there's a secondary suite and it's all continues to be single story and they're asking for an increased area, I don't see that being a necessity. I understand the desire to move the farm home plate. Perhaps they have a better view or a better overall feeling of being in that space. But due to the actual footprint and size and scale of what it is that's being proposed, unfortunately, I won't be able to support this. And if it was smaller or it fit within the 35% lot coverage, I wouldn't have an issue with them moving their farm home plate and aging in place at this lovely location in Summerland.
Councillor Barkwell.
Since the farm home plate area is out of production anyway, what you necessarily cover it with doesn't really bother me too much. It's, it could be housing or it could be landscaped, but it's not it's not in the production, so I don't see why it really matters. A matter of fact, I can see why we have maximum lot coverages for residential areas. You don't want to encroach, you got to fit the neighborhood. But when you have a house within a 10-acre parcel and you have a farm home plate, how much of that farm home plate you cover isn't going to impact anybody, isn't going to make any difference on the production of the land, and really is. It makes me wonder why. I guess you got to have some limits, but this 35% is totally arbitrary. It just isn't necessary. The house is not going to do any harm. I agree with the limit. I guess you got to pick a number. The 500 square meters puts a limit on the total size. But if your farm home plate is, and I don't remember the number here, is what it is, then it's going to be covered with something. So it may as well be building, and a secondary suite provides more accommodation in the community. So I can support it.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can support it also with the secondary suite under the same roof line as the principal residence. For the fact of the matter is, it's one service going in, it's one septic field. If it's detached, it could have another service. So I don't have a problem with it. If it was a secondary dwelling, it would be away from the house somewhat, could disrupt the flow of the orchard or the agricultural ability. So I'm in favor of it the way it stands. Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen's comments have raised a question with me, and that is the house that's being demolished. Sorry, I don't want to run out of battery. The house that's being demolished is somewhere on the property now. And I'm just making the assumption that there are people living in it. So does this new dwelling, does this use the no, never mind. This is probably on sewer, isn't it? Is it? It's not sewered. Okay, so my question is, does this new building, new residence, use the same septic field as the demolished house, or is it somewhere else on the property?
Yeah, so ultimately, all of the septic systems in Summerland are approved through Interior Health at the building permit stage. So whatever registered wastewater practitioner approves for the new house is what will be used for septic. So for example, if they say the old system is sufficient and can be hooked up, then I'm sure they'll go with that route. But if they require an upgrade, then they'll be required to install that.
I understand that. The reason I was asking the question is if they have to install another septic field, does that not limit the amount of orchard like production on the site?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a small potential for that, but yeah, I mean, I would, to be honest, the current abilities to remediate lands that were previously used for septic have come a long way. So I wouldn't think it's a long-term concern for the property in terms of losing an area for a small portion of time.
It seems to me if the rationale for this application is to increase the amount of farmland that's under production, if you have to install, and I'm saying if a septic field has to be installed in the area that is presumably going to be under agricultural production, that doesn't, I mean, the two things don't line up. Councillor Barkwell.
Lots of orchards are right over septic drain fields, and they're the greenest part of the orchard. I can point out to specific examples if you like. I don't see as a septic field as being any sort of a impediment to farming the land. But apart from that, I guess I have a question. If the applicant could do exactly what they wanted, take down the building and build a new one where they want it, if they made it like 11% smaller, that it wouldn't, other than that one specific size increase for the coverage of the farm home plate, it wouldn't come to council at all and it would fit everything else. Yeah. So, okay, thank you.
It's a variance. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but would the septic system not have to be located within the home plate and not outside of the home plate?
No, for our home plate definition, sorry, through the chair to Councillor Patton, no, the septic system doesn't have to be included within the farm home plate itself to be part of that definition. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I'm ready to call a question then. All in favor? Opposed? So that is defeated. Defeated. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Oh, you're all ready to go for the next one. Except my notes say that Joanne is doing this. You're not, Joanne? So this is 9.2, Official Community Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment for 13316 Prairie Valley Road, Z20-013.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this official community plan amendment and zoning amendment bylaw are being brought back to council to consider second reading for 13316 Prairie Valley Road. Just to jog everyone's memory, so the current OCP future land use designation of the property is agricultural, and the current zoning is agricultural small acreage A1. So the amendment bylaws before council today it would extend the urban growth area identified in the official community plan and shown on the map there, and it would extend to include the subject property, which is outlined in teal. It would also change the OCP designation from agricultural to low-density residential intensification. And it would change the zoning designation from A1 to RSD1I, which is the residential single detached intensive zone. Just to quickly compare those two zones. So the purpose of the bylaws is to facilitate a subdivision of smaller lot sizes. The concept plan is shown on the right there. And the RSD1 zone has a smaller minimum lot area, obviously, than the A1 zone. So this proposed zone would allow for lot sizes of 360 square meters and potentially less with a density bonus. The proposed zoning designation requires full urban services as part of our bylaw requirements. So this would include a connection to the district's community water and community sewer systems. Sanitary sewer is not currently available near the property at this point in time. And just as a reminder to council, the applicant presented two options, either to connect to the district system, should there be an extension close by in the future, or to be granted a variance to allow for a private communal system on the property. So the issue of sanitary sewer is something that should be resolved before the adoption of the bylaws, and there is a variance application that is on hold, asking for a private system. So because this is an OCP amendment, council must consider what consultation it thinks appropriate for the application. So just noted in the report to council, we did send out external agency referrals. This application was received back before the development procedures bylaw was changed. So a public information meeting has not been held. But the public hearing would be an opportunity for the general public to make comments about the application. So council did consider this application on May 10th of last year, and a copy of the previous staff report was included in council's package with a brief summary of council's discussion at that time. Council did resolve to support the application and provided first reading of the bylaws. But at that time, the bylaws were not given second reading because council requested that an environmental impact assessment be provided first. And this was because the property is identified in the OCP as environmentally sensitive. Since then, the applicant hired David Cassidy, a qualified environmental professional with an RP Bio designation, to prepare an environmental impact assessment, and the results of that assessment were supportive of the development. And David Cassidy did note in his assessment that the development would have minimal impact and that the EIA provides the necessary protection measures or mitigation to move forward. Under the district's terms of reference for environmental impact assessments, we do consider avoidance of ESA 1 and ESA 2 areas as the preferred option. And you can see this is a map of David Cassidy's report, where the ESA 1 area shown in red is a small area at the corner of the property where that is entirely avoided by the proposed development. So all of that high value area is retained, and about 97% of the moderate area shown in yellow is also outside of the development permit or the development area that's proposed. So based on council's previous direction to support the bylaws and based on the supportive results of the environmental impact assessment, staff is recommending that council proceed with second reading and the scheduling of a public hearing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Joanne. Questions? I have one question. We know that there is the potential for the community sewer system to be extended not far from this property. I think I heard you say that with the two options that were presented by the applicant, that the possibility of the variance for a communal system has been put on hold. Are those two things related to each other?
Yes, so the variance application was put on hold, I believe, before these bylaws even received first reading. That was before my time, but they did want to see what happened with the Eco Village site and to see what happened in terms of the potential to connect into sewer. And the applicant's representative is on the line if you want to ask him for an update on that as well.
Okay, and that is Mr. Alenko, right? Are you there, Brad, to speak further to my question?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, at the time that we put in the application, there was the two sewer options as was mentioned by staff. One was certainly to be able to access the municipal sanitary sewer, and the other was to look at a private system. We didn't want to proceed with the private system and spend the time and effort on our behalf and on staff and council's behalf until we had a little better idea of the direction of council in terms of the bigger picture, the change in land use. We certainly have got a couple of thoughts in mind, and it's really about timing, and that's something that we'll be discussing with staff in due course about what is a reasonable expectation, or what are the thoughts at this time about the timing of getting municipal sanitary sewer in that area. If that time frame is outside of what the owner would like to do, then we would certainly consider the private sewer system, but that system would be designed in such a way that it could be converted very easily to a municipal system. So the pipes in the ground would be sized and to a standard that meets the municipal system or the municipal standards. But it's really going to be about timing now, pardon me, in terms of whether or not we'll proceed with the DVP for the private system, or whether we'll sit tight and wait for a municipal system to be able to service the development. So yeah, there are two options, and we didn't proceed with the DVP simply because we wanted to get some political legs under this, and then we'll have those discussions with staff about the timing of, or have them give us an idea what their thoughts are about the timing moving forward. And I know that all kind of ties back into the district's bigger plans with the development up on the top. So lots of moving parts here, and we just didn't want to confuse or muddy the waters with another application at this time. I hope that answers your question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Brad. It does raise another question, though, and that is, I know that the environmental assessment report has been done, and Mr. Cassidy did that. I'm just wondering, this is a little bit of devil's advocate. If it turns out that the eco-village either doesn't proceed or proceeds outside of the applicant's timeline, and you want to look at the communal system, I'm not even sure if staff can answer this right now, but I'm just wondering if it would be worthwhile to find out if a communal system could go in there, given the at least some of the sensitivities, environmental sensitivities that are in that area, or if it would just be a no-go. It seems that maybe there's the opportunity to save a lot of time and heartache if that doesn't go, if the sewer system doesn't go through there. Brad?
I can shed a little bit of light.
Sorry, we'll go to you, Brad, first, and then we'll go to our Brad next.
Okay, great. Thanks, Madam Mayor. And yes, we were certainly concerned, but we certainly needed to understand whether or not a private system could work as well. Because, from our perspective, thinking that something might work and then finding out after we've went through this process that in fact it won't work is not good for the owner as well. So we actually had one of our sewer specialists, one of our engineering fellows who specializes in sewer systems, to evaluate a type 3 system, a sanitary or a private system, ensuring that the disposal area and so forth for that type of a system could work. And in fact, we were told from him after he evaluated quality of the soils, the amount of land that's there, that yes, that could work. It would likely mean that one of the lots in that subdivision would not be built on at this point in time, because that would be required for some of the infrastructure for the private system. But in terms of engineering, soils, areas, those types of engineering aspects, a private system can work on that site. And so that was something that we did determine very early in the program, because it was important for us to know that.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. Brad, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to elaborate as well that our staff recommendation, at least, is that we hold the adoption of this rezoning if it gets to that point until the servicing is determined, whether that servicing is through a variance approval through council, through allowing for a private system, or a plan to connect into the district system, either one.
So they're all tied together. Okay, thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So just following up on that, is it like Sunset Place, where you can, the idea is that they'd all be connected and then end up in one central place for a private one, and if they did that, it could be connected to the sewer at some point in the future? I think that's wasn't that kind of the thinking for Sunset Place?
Through your worship, to Councillor Holmes, I think that would be the developer's intention with the private system, but wouldn't be our staff recommendation. But that would be, I think, the subject of that variance consideration.
Okay, any other questions? Would someone like to bring forward a motion then, please? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the official community plan amendment for 11316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-015 be read a second time. That the process, as outlined in this report from Planner 2, dated April 11th, 2022, be considered appropriate consultation for the purpose of Section 475 of the Local Government Act. That zoning bylaw amendment 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw 2021-016 be read a second time, and that a public hearing be held on May 9th, 2022 to receive public feedback on the official community plan amendment 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-015, and zoning bylaw amendment for 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-016.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. Seconder, Councillor Van Alphen. And further discussion? I just have one question. That has to do with expanding the urban growth boundary to facilitate this subdivision. My understanding is typically that's done when there is a sewer line going through, and there may be. I'm wondering if the communal system, I know that that would be a variance, but I'm wondering if that would interfere, or maybe this is a decision of council, I don't really know, if that would interfere with the urban growth expansion until we knew that the sewer line was actually going to be there that they could use. Does that make any sense? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for for the question, Your Worship. This discussion of the urban growth boundary and the extension of the urban growth boundary was heavily discussed by staff at the time at first reading, and it was a strong rationale from our perspective for recommending refusal of this rezoning back in, I think it was July of 2021, maybe even prior to that, my memory recalls. But generally, it's a bit of a chicken and egg concept with extension of sewer versus the urban growth boundary, and there is different schools of thought of that actually. Generally, from a planning perspective, we like to think that planning should come first, that the urban growth boundary should be set first, and that's where we want to target for areas for potential sewer expansion. I would assume, I wasn't here at the time with the District of Summerland, but I would assume that would be the reason why Deer Ridge was kept in the urban growth boundaries, because we were envisioning an area there for a sewer expansion to that area and allowing for future growth to come from that. But sometimes in other jurisdictions, especially as well, sometimes it's a matter of the sewer utility being available. RUS is a great example. It triggering the consideration of an urban growth node, for example. So, but I think that we set the urban growth boundary first, and then sewer should follow from that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
Yes, if council will recall that before Brad's time, we had a proposal for Deer Ridge that didn't involve sewer. It was larger lots, and they all could have had septic fields, and we said no at the time. We want to see higher density, and we'll work hard to try and get the sewer out that way. I look at this little spot here along the road, adjacent to all that urban growth area, is almost like infill. The only reason we didn't include it in the urban growth area way back when, in about 2014, was that it hadn't really been on the table when we had community consultation in the previous OCP. But it is, it is just a little corner that seems to fit, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Councillor Barkwell. I just wanted to get that clear because, like you said, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, and I just wanted to make sure I had it clear in my mind. Any other comments or any further discussion, questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Joanne. Zoning bylaw amendment 15835 Logie Road and 15836 Industrial Avenue, Z22-003.
Alrighty. So there is a site-specific rezoning application for 15835 Logie Road and 15836 Industrial Avenue. The proposed site-specific zoning designation seeks to amend the light industrial M1 zone to include storage yard as a permitted principal use. This would allow the operation of a general storage facility offering outdoor storage of boats, RVs, and commercial storage options in the future. Oh, there we go. So the property has previously been operated as a truck cap manufacturing, storage, and retail space. The existing buildings would be demolished and replaced with a fenced outdoor storage area. The subject property is currently designated as light industrial in the district's official community plan and is currently zoned M1 light industrial. So the property is bordered on two sides by the agricultural land reserve. So a letter of correspondence was received from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. Ministry staff noted that edge planning should be in accordance with the ministry's guide to edge planning and be implemented as part of the rezoning. This would include a 15-meter building setbacks from the north and west lot lines and an 8-meter vegetative buffer installed along these lot lines. Ministry staff also recommended placing disclosure statements on title of the property notifying future purchasers that the property is located in an agricultural area, which may assist in raising awareness of issues such as noise, odor, and dust. A letter was also received from the Agricultural Land Commission. ALC staff, however, noted that Jones Flat Road and Logie Road are within the ALR, so it's reasonable to consider the road width as setbacks. ALC staff also noted that the district may want to consider a buffering or a solid fence as on the industrial property to avoid any concern with agricultural impacts, including contaminants from spraying. The proposed zoning text amendment has received preliminary approval from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. One slide back, or actually, oh, nope, that's the right one. So the application was considered by the Advisory Planning Commission on March 25th, 2022. There was general support for allowing the storage facility use at the proposed location. However, some concerns were raised over the requirement of vegetative screening. Ultimately, the APC recommended that the rezoning bylaw be supported on the basis that vegetative screening is provided. At the discretion of the Director of Development Services, in accordance with the Development Application Procedures Bylaw, a developer-directed public information meeting was not required for this proposed zoning amendment. Okay, so commercial storage is a permitted principal use under the existing zoning of M1 light industrial, but it is specific to indoor commercial storage in enclosed buildings. The proposed business operation for the site includes outdoor storage of boats and RVs. This is a use that is only permitted under the storage yard classification. You can see in the table list, a list of uses are permitted in both the light industrial and heavy industrial zone, and the uses that are only allowed in just heavy industrial. As you can see, there are similarities between the zones, and you can also see the M2 zone allows for more expansive and intensive uses such as sawmills and wrecking yards. The inclusion of storage yard use in the to this M1 property by itself is not seen as an overly intensive by staff and could even be considered a light industrial use. There are several neighboring jurisdictions, including the City of Penticton and the City of West Kelowna, that permit outdoor storage uses within their light industrial zoning designations. As shown on the site plan, the property would be fenced off with entrance and exit gates. The applicant has opted not to alter the proposed plan in response to the Advisory Planning Commission's recommendation, however, is still meeting the zoning bylaw requirements for screening. Parking stalls for the storage line the northern and southern portions of the property. Allowing storage yard as a site-specific use within the M1 zone is not anticipated to have a significant impact on the nature of the light industrial designation or diverge from adjacent light industrial uses. As such, staff are recommending that the zoning amendment bylaw number 22-013 be provided first and second reading and proceed to a public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. More comment, if I may. I know the industrial property extremely well. Its previous life was a canopy manufacturing facility. I'm sure we're going to get lots of letters of support from neighbors that no longer have to smell resins curing. This is, in my personal opinion, I will be supporting this. I think this is a brilliant use for this property. I'm sure our bylaw officials will be cheering up and down that there's finally storage in our community for boats and RVs that are usually parked, a lot of them on the streets and or in yards.
Could you fashion a question and then we can come back to this when we have something on the floor.
Any idea
Just make one up.
Any idea how long this will take?
If I may answer that through your worship to Councillor Van Alven. So we did instruct the applicant this would require a text amendment. Unfortunately, because it is a text amendment, it also requires MODI approval. So we're trying to fast track this as quickly as we can. We went to committees with it already, and we will have the public hearing set, but then it'll probably be not until probably, I would say, early June. They could probably move forward with it. And doesn't look like there will be a building permit required. I don't know, if maybe not with regards to their site plan, but.
Yeah, so currently there's no structures proposed for the property at this time. I presume that may change in the future when operations get going. But.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I will get back to you, I won't forget. So right now, there's just the demolition of what's on the site now.
That's correct.
Okay. I just have one question for clarification. There was a bit of a difference from the recommendations from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries and the Agricultural Land Commission regarding the setbacks. But they have chosen not to use the Jones Flat Road as the setback, which is already in the Agricultural Land Reserve. And they're going to be putting that, at least this is how I read the plan. It shows a fence rather than the vegetative screening. And the whole yard is, the setback is within that lot line. It's not including the road.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just clarify those comments. So basically, the Ministry of Agriculture was responding based on the ministry's guide to edge planning, which is a document that has kind of blanket, I guess, recommendations for how we should orient developments that abut agriculture, whether that be agriculture to agriculture or industrial or residential. So they were presenting the standard recommendations out of that document, whereby the ALC was recognizing that the agricultural land reserve, a boundary actually abuts over the road. It's not contained to the adjacent parcel across the road. So they're just acknowledging that we can view that as a significant setback area from agricultural activities, as it's like a 14-meter right away or so. So yeah.
But the applicant has chosen to the 15 meters setback.
So
I can't tell from the, sorry for interrupting. I can't tell from the plan how far back that is from the road.
Yeah, so there's no setback for right now on the property shown because there's no structures shown. We would have our standard M1 setbacks applying to any structures that would be sited on the property.
Okay, and then they've chosen the fence rather than a vegetative buffer, solid fence.
Yeah, so they went with the 2.4 meter high solid fence.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Van Alphen, would you like to bring the motion forward?
Happily. That is zoning bylaw amendment 15835 Logie Road and 15836 Industrial Avenue bylaw number 2022-013 be read a first and second time, and that a public hearing be held on May 9th, 2022 to receive public feedback on zoning bylaw amendment 15835 Logie Road and 15836 Industrial Avenue bylaw number 2022-013.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Holmes. Would you care to speak on this, Councillor Van Alphen?
Oh, I could go on and on. No, no, I just think it's a great opportunity for our community. This type of storage is lacking. I know that from experience. I have people contact me probably on a yearly basis going, oh, you've got lots of room on your farm. No, I don't. I know people that have looked in Penticton for RV and boat storage, and it's almost impossible. So I think this is a great business opportunity and a huge opportunity for local residents here in Summerland to find a place where they can store their recreational vehicles. And even goes back to earlier today, yeah, you may want to call it derelict, but it might be a collector car or something like that that people don't want in their yard, or maybe bylaw doesn't want in their yard, but there's an opportunity for a storage facility, which, like I say, we don't have any. So I think it's great. Thank you.
Great. And like you said, it's a secured site, so that takes worry away from people. I agree. I'm not really sure why storage yard would be in, I'm not sure if it's medium or heavy industrial and not in the M1, the light industrial, because, other than vehicles coming in and out, there's not a lot of industrial activity. But anyways, that's the way it shows right now. Any further discussion on this? Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? And none are opposed, so that carries unanimously. Okay. Item 12.1, notice of motion. As council is aware, I wanted to give notice of a forthcoming motion, so that'll be on our next council meeting, April the 25th, for council to consider an anti-racism and anti-discrimination policy here in the district. So there'll be more on April the 25th. At the Local Government Leadership Academy, Don Lidstone, I think everybody here knows who Don Lidstone is, a Vancouver-based lawyer that works primarily with local government in BC, Alberta, and the Yukon. He gave us a presentation on why it's important, not only from a legal perspective, but from the perspective of it being the right thing to do to make sure that we have some kind of policy to save ourselves from potential legal risk if something happens in and or around a municipal facility. So we'll be talking about that more on the 25th. Next on the information items, 6 pieces of correspondence. Anything that someone would like to bring forward? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that correspondence piece number A, which is Access BC, a request for support asking the provincial government for free prescription contraception in British Columbia. I do think it's very important, and I think that it's not the right time tonight to put that forward. I do think that council should at some point put forward a resolution to support Access BC in their campaign.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. And that's satisfactory for you tonight?
There's a whole thing here. I just don't know if it's something that we would necessarily want to bring forward in this moment, or if it's something that has to come forward later in a proper.
Well, it's always better for process if we have time to digest it a little bit. I mean, I know that we have this in our packages, but
okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to bring it forward then, so we don't have to worry about it later. So there's a motion here for universal no-cost coverage of prescription contraception, and it's brought forward from a campaign by Access BC. So I'll read the whole thing and see if anyone on council is willing to support this. It says, whereas cost is an absolute barrier to people accessing contraception, particularly for people with low incomes, youth, and people from equity-seeking communities, whereas providing no-cost prescription contraception improves health outcomes for parents and infants by reducing the risk associated with unintended pregnancy and is likely to reduce direct medical costs in the provincial health system. Whereas contraceptive methods targeted at males, such as condoms and vasectomies, are available at low cost or are covered by the BC Medical Services Plan, whereas contraceptive methods for people with uteruses, such as birth control, IUDs, and hormone injections, have high upfront costs, making access to contraception inequitable. Therefore, be it resolved that Council direct the Mayor to write to the provincial government and urge them to make all prescription contraception universally available at no cost under the BC Medical Services Plan. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Van Elfen. Thank you. Discussion on this? Councillor Carlson.
Yeah, just one. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of employers and if you have full benefits, you will most likely be able to access these things, especially as a woman. But there are a lot of people who don't have that and don't have access, and it can be extremely expensive and very cost prohibitive for many people. So I think that overall, it's a very worthwhile initiative, and I do hope that someday it will be what happens in British Columbia. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate you bringing this forward. And I totally agree with not only the upfront costs, but also the impact on our medical system. And I would say that would include the medical system that is directed towards mental health. To have an unwanted pregnancy, especially if you're young or on the streets, would be, I just can't imagine the angst that a young woman would go through. So thank you for bringing that up. All in favor? Thank you. Happy to write the letter. Or to have Kendra write it and I'll sign it. No, no, just kidding, Kendra. Okay, any other pieces of correspondence? I noticed that there's a thank you from MP Julian for endorsing Bill C-229 to ban the sale and public display or private display of symbols of hate. So that was nice. UBCM and Silga is in there. Thank you letter from the Museum and Archives Society. So that's good. Okay, if I could have someone bring forward the correspondence to receive that for information. Councillor Van Elfen, and seconded by Councillor Carlson. All in favor? Thank you. No committee or commission minutes, so on to councillor reports. And I'm going to start with you, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have too much to report. Note that the CEO of the Okanagan Regional Library, Don Nettleton, is retiring from his position this summer, so they will be looking for a new leader at the library. And other than that, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Just like to mention the Slavia Ukrainia fundraiser we had on Saturday night. It was an incredible success. We had over 90 people there. Haven't counted the total money raised, but it was in the thousands, several $1,000s, we estimate. And it was just great to see the community, the whole community coming together to show their support for the cause. And so I'd like to thank the resort for giving the venue, and all the businesses and organizations and individuals who donated to silent auction, and on all the performers who donated their time to entertain everybody. And thanks to Councillor Patton and Van Elfen for coming out. That was great to see you guys there. And it was something that was just kind of whipped up last minute, spur of the moment. And it's incredible when a group of community members with a good idea come together and what they can achieve in a short period of time. So that was great to see. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Holmes. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I have contributed to not that fundraiser, but other Ukrainian fundraisers. So thank you so much for bringing that forward for the community. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the museum monthly meeting, and things are going along well there. They have Petra has moved into the curator position, and some of you may have seen ads. They're looking for a new administrator. And do you know anyone? There's a position, an interesting position if you're interested in Summerland history. And other than that, no particular developments. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing, April 30th at 1 o'clock at the KVR train station is their annual AGM this year. So that's going to be that good time by all at their AGM. And I want to thank Councillor Holmes. The Saturday night was a lot of fun and the entertainment was really good. It had a really fun atmosphere and it was a job well done. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Van Alphen.
Not a lot to report. I was very fortunate, Madam Mayor, to just get home and see family back in Ontario. Got to see grandnieces that I haven't seen or never met because of COVID. And so it was a lovely week off. I arrived home Friday night at supper time and it was informed late Saturday afternoon about a fundraiser at the Waterfront Resort. And we're luckily got tickets. And I want to thank Councillor Holmes and the whole committee that put this on. It was a lovely evening, some great entertainment. And I want to also hats off to our very own Joanne Millar, who was the MC. That was absolutely amazing. She's Mr. Calling, or if she ever wants to do part-time MCing, she's really good. And she can really dance also. So anyways, wonderful evening for me. Thank you.
Great. All right. Marianne, would you like to come forward?
Marianne McDonald, 6505 McDonald Place. When they brought up about the Logan industrial site, we did discuss having vegetative, but I think it was to be on the outside of the fenced area. I think that they misunderstood that because we were just trying to provide sort of a vegetative buffer between the industrial and the fencing. Like, did you know what I mean? Yeah. And the other one is I have to concur with Councillor Carlson. When you have a bylaw that says it's 35 square meters for a home plate, I'm really concerned that when people go above and beyond that, we're going to have the same scenario that's right next to the graveyards. So the big graveyard. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come and do you have any further comments on our agenda items this evening?
No.
Yeah. You're sitting here, you sat through the whole thing, so thank you for that. All right. Well, as you heard from our discussion and our vote, we did hear you. So yes, I appreciate you attending the meeting and you as well, Marianne. Okay, adjournment. Councillor Van Alphen and Holmes